I started logging in 1967, and then for 4 summers, so 68, 69, and 70, and then to work to get money for college, and it was really good pay. But and then this finger, I lost that finger in a fair lead, and that was worth a quarter of school though, for workman's comp. So that helped. So yeah, and then so I worked for my grandfather's company, DeYoung Logging Company. My mother was a DeYoung, and her brother also helped run it. His name was Robbie. And then my dad worked for them also. He was a faller. So for 2 summers, I worked on the landing, which was basically they bring the logs in on a big cables and drop them down, and then you run in and you unhook the cables, and then you run back out of the way, and then the cables go off up on the tower and then out to the road again, and then you run in and you cut the limbs off and you cut the logs into the right lengths, and then you scurry off again, and then the loader takes them and puts them on trucks, and then the next load comes in, boom, drops them down, and you get out of the way, and then you run in and you unhook them and you run out, and then the chokers go away, then you come back and you cut them up and limb them. So you kind of do that all day. But it's not quite that fast. Sometimes it is, but it's usually more of a manageable pace.
So you got to stay on your toes.
You got to be careful. And then for 2 summers, I actually was a faller with my dad. You always you fall trees as
fallers kind
partners.
Of what people think about, right? The saw, and you're actually cutting.
The trees down, and each tree is a puzzle. Really, you have to put it somewhere where it won't break and ruin the lumber for merchantable timber. And then in a lot of those cases, it was behind a mountain logger, which was like a big tractor with kind of a station in the back that pulled up the logs. And then you'd hook up the chokers after you fell them, and then it would haul them back to the landing. And then you go fall another couple trees while he's doing that. And then you got to fall them positioned right so they can hook them both up and drag them in the same direction. And you do that all day long. And then other times we'd fall for a fair lead or a tower, which would be basically a big, usually, well, they're not always round, but it was some section of timber. And you just fall them all at once, and then you didn't have to worry about people being in the way. It was a little more efficient to fall that way. And then of course, there is a little bit of a rite of passage here going in that probably Shyler can understand. I mean, I'm learning how to do this logging stuff from my dad, right? He taught me some really good things, like when you pull the chainsaw with the chain out of the log when you're cutting it, bucking it, and you cut it. And so you time it such that the chain is not moving when you pull it out. And other things to be safe. And but it was just the 2 of us falling and nobody around. And I finally turned my saw off because I don't know what I was doing, but I turned it off because usually you have it going. And I heard this, "Hee!" And I go, "Oh, my dad is hung up and he needs some help to get out." So a tree had you try to cut them, in a direction that they're going to go, and the wind usually helps because it's like a big sail, right? So the wind will take it and fall it. But sometimes the wind will die, or it'll swirl, or you'll miscalculate, and the tree will kind of go, and it sits down on your blade of your saw, which is like 4 million tons of wood sitting on your saw. So there's nothing you can do. So basically, I came down to where he was and cut a different undercut in a different direction and fell the tree, hopefully away from his saw, so it didn't smash his saw, which was possible to do. But that was kind of like, okay, I just bailed my dad out from his saw being stuck. So I still remember that. So that was logging, but it was really good money, and I could go to school and not have to work too much at school.
Where was this?
Oh, it was mostly in Southwest Washington, a little bit up on the lower Olympic Peninsula, and then some down south of Aberdeen. Smith Creek, I remember Smith Creek, which was just south of, between Aberdeen and Raymond.
So then, your grandparents started it?
My grandfather, yes, Sam DeYoung. He was originally from Friesland, which is a province of Holland, and he came over at the turn of the century and started a dairy farm and bought a piece of property and wound up having a lot of gravel on it. It was where the Chehalis River flows to Grays Harbor, and about 20 miles in from Grays Harbor, and so there was some good gravel on it. And then I'm not sure why he started a logging company, but he was an industrious soul, that guy. In fact, he was still logging when he died at age 81. He was, I think, trimming some limbs off logs that came into the landing and fell over backwards and hit his head on one of the trees. I think it was on a little knot, and he didn't wake up.
So he actually
So he
passed away while on the job.
While on the job. Yeah, and I'm not going to do that. I hope.
Yeah, no, that's quite intense.
Anyway.
Shyler, are there any stories that you remember your dad talking about growing up from logging?
Yeah, I mean, well, my favorite is obviously so they would make this, they did it all, me growing up, whenever we'd go back to Elma, which is the town where they lived in. And I mean, it seemed like everybody was involved in logging at some point in their life. And so if you were far away across the field, or if you were down by the creek or whatever, so you do this little yip that, yee! Well, because it carried really well, because a high-pitched sound will carry. And I mean, I remember they would just be like, yee, 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 like all over this farm. So it was kind of funny. But no, I mean, like, some of them are sad. Some of them are, it was dangerous work. I remember cousin Brad.
John.
Well, didn't cousin Brad
hit the collarbone?
Didn't somebody fall off the back of the truck and pass away?
Oh, yeah, when he was 9.
Well, so they had.
He was driving the tractor. Yeah.
They had
It was a hay trailer, and throwing bales on. And Dave was my grandfather Sam's best friend, who also came from Friesland, and they both walked across the top of the country together. And I guess they enjoyed walking because they didn't stop before they got to Satsop, Washington, which is like, really, this is where you stopped after seeing everything? But yeah, they stopped, and so they were haying, and my Brad was 9, and he was driving the tractor, and Dave was on the trailer, and Sam would like throw a hay bale on the trailer, and then Dave would stack it while it's moving, and then and they'd stop now and then. Brad was driving it, and he slipped the clutch, being 9 years old, and Dave fell off, and he didn't make it either. So it was tough on those guys back then. He was a young man, so yeah. Anyway, that was a sad story.
Yeah, but I also remember runaway log trucks and like clutches going out. And
yeah,
basically,
we've got some pictures here.
Having to shift, basically going down that mountain with the brakes out and the clutch out, and so just rev matching, to slow it down.
Trying to hit the right
and bring
gear.
it down to a lower gear.
Some of the tire tracks were up on these cut banks. You follow in with the truck down and go, oh, this wasn't me, but this is secondhand, and you see the
like a NASCAR oval
yeah,
track.
really.
Yeah.
Obviously, one of them didn't make it in one of these pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a tough life, No, I remember Sam was the patriarch of the family,
Yeah.
and everyone really respected him because he worked so hard. And,
Well, I used to have to change irrigation, things he didn't have to do. These like 40-foot aluminum pipe, and you have to pick them up and then you push them in and then you twist them to unlatch the thing and you pull them out and you walk them over, 30, 40 yards to the next row and then you go back and get another one. And I'm not sure I got paid for that actually. So I had he had a lot of grandchildren, free laborers, but it was fun most of the time.
yeah.
We had a lot of free time on the farm. Did a lot of fishing in the Chehalis River also. And there was a slough there too that we fished in. So we didn't work all day. Anyway. Yeah, but the logging was kind of a rite of passage too, because there's just not many people that could do that. Just not many people can work that hard. And I lost 15 pounds one day when it was 90-some degrees up on Smith Creek from being on the landing. And I didn't weigh much more than 190 at the time, and I rode crew at college, so I was in pretty good shape. But it was so hot, and I was taking salt pills. I just remember the sweat was coming down, and it was like pure salt on my tongue. I just remember that. The show goes on. You got to do it because the next load comes in, and that timber was really scruffy, and it had so many limbs on it that it was like hemlocks. And the hemlock would just bounce when you drop it, and they wouldn't even break off. You had to cut off all those branches, and then they brought another one in right after that. So it was really pretty hard. And I wish I still had my boots, but I actually had my dad's cork boots till about 6 months before I bought Nicks in 2013. So it would have been pretty cool to have them in the Nicks museum. I'm not sure what's in the museum right now, but we would have had one pair of cork boots, I guess.
Oh, you're in it.
I'm in the museum. Yeah, that's true. That's true. So that was.
Did everybody log? All the brothers?
No. No, I had two really smart brothers, and they did not. They worked in a mill that my dad also worked in after logging in White Star, which is a little place between McClary and Elma that Murphy Plywood owns now. So they worked there. That's a lot easier. My cousin John, Uncle John Powell,
Sure.
cousin John Powell, worked for a little bit because it was really good money, but he was kind of a city guy and he didn't last that long. He cut, he was fine, but you have to do certain things a certain way. You put a little undercut on things because that relieves the stress on the wood, and then you come in from the back and it just falls over. But you also, if you have a really sharp saw and you stay out of the way, you can just start in on the back and cut down really fast, and then the thing will fall over if it's like this big or something. And we were clear cutting, which was kind of junky wood, small little things that weren't merchantable, and he got in and it barber chaired on him and whacked him in the collarbone. He broke his collarbone. So a lot of people break their collarbone, so he was fine, but he didn't work in the woods anymore. Yeah.
You've kind of already talked about it a little bit, but how did growing up working in logging and seeing all your family logging affect your work ethic and then appreciation for craftsmanship?
That's a good question. I was a little bit of a differentiator with my older brother, who was incredibly smart. He was a 4-point in high school, and
he's still alive.
Magna cum, and he's still around. And he's magna cum laude at University of Oregon, and then went to Harvard Law School, and was a very successful lawyer in Portland. And I didn't really, maybe I don't think I was that smart, but I didn't really want to go on that path, and so I was more physical. So it was kind of a physical identity for me, is working in the woods, because that's really hard, and you got to be pretty tough. So it kind of separated me there, and the craftsmanship in the woods is not really craftsmanship. It's just bludgeoning these things. You know, I mean, you're cutting them down, falling them, and cutting off with a chainsaw. So, but you do have to be precise. You have to cut it off the right length so you can. It's 33 feet, so you have a foot of extra. Uh, uh, 32 is kind of the ideal, because you can get 4 8-foot studs out of each one, and then. But being careful was built in. That's for sure. It's like, okay, where am I going to step right now, right? So, but I guess I know a lot of the people who buy our boots, because it's a tool. You know, their boots are a tool. You need to get the work done, and you can't have boots that don't last very long. So I'm really I will do everything in my power to make sure we continue to make cork boots, because they're important. I think
we'll continue to make our four cork boots a year.
I think we sold the 12 a couple of years ago. Yeah, but hey, it's hard to do though. It's hard to make those.
It is hard to make those.
Yeah. So what aspects of like what you learned and experienced in logging did you find important to carry into Nicks when you transitioned to ownership here?
I think I really had an appreciation for all the workers, in that it's hard work. I mean, the lasters are, you know, they got to be really strong, and it's not easy to working with your body all day long. So I think it was really important to take good care of them. So the first 3 years, you know, all the money that we increased our revenue and our profits kind of slowly, but all that money went to the wages. Because when I bought the company, you know, in 2013, starting salary was $9 an hour. I'm going, how do you make a living? How do you feed a family for $9 an hour? And you don't. So, you know, it got up. I mean, the state put in a law that you had to pay $15 an hour, which I totally agreed with, and we were there. We got there just as that kicked in, so it wasn't a really hardship for us. So that was probably it. You know, I mean, the workers are part of your constituency. You have customers, and you have suppliers, you know, and you have your workers, and you have to take care of them all.
Is there anything from your family history in logging that you've found important to carry into Nicks?
You know, I think just similarly, in the sense that, you know, I was not a logger, right? I was fortunate enough to be raised in a pretty,
you didn't have to be,
pretty urban environment. But no, I think that was my intersection with a rural existence, really. And so I would go there every summer for many years, and you know, our family had branches that were definitely, you know, into farming or, you know, other activities like that. And you know, I'm not gonna like masquerade like I'm one of them or anything like that, but it definitely gave me an appreciation for how hard people worked. My grandfather, you know, he was a taciturn man, but he worked hard, and he showed his love with craftsmanship. Remember, he would make woodworking. That was his passion.
Yeah.
Like toys and
trucks,
furniture,
little trucks, wood trucks.
You know, I still have some wooden book racks and, you know, blanket racks and that sort of thing from him. So, but I think just kind of brushing up against that in my life has given you, you know, a valuable perspective, and, you know, definitely applicable here at Nicks, where, you know, many of our boots are going to people that have that life and are proud of it, and, you know, making their way through the world that way.
I think one of the things that is still true today is respecting the people that enjoy working with their hands and working all day long and making stuff. And then they can say, oh, I made that. And then at the end of the day, they go home and they also don't worry about work at night, unlike us afterwards. So you can appreciate that there's always going to be a good pool of people that we can draw from as long as we're paying a good wage. So I think that's one thing that's encouraging about having a factory.
What does it mean for both of you to work together?
I think it's a source of pride for me that basically we did the opposite of what many companies do. They start as family businesses and then sell off to some conglomerate, and we started as a small business and then turned into a family business. So I think it's a great pleasure to work with my son, and I don't work with him every day. I think he'd probably like to get a little more out of me, but he knows a lot more than I do about the business at this stage. So I think it's great.
Yeah, I think it's been I remember when I started, it was, I don't know, it was nice because we're not actually that similar in a lot of ways, which I think is good in this context, right? You have different perspectives on these things, and it's good to have diversity there. But it's a good bonding experience for us, having that kind of common drive and common goal, there's probably easier ways to connect with your dad.
Maybe a golf weekend we could do.
Yeah,
sometime.
but no, I mean, as a family enterprise, and something that's a big part of both of our lives, I think it's been something that's been cool to experience together, and it's brought us closer, and you get to know someone pretty well when you're running a business together. I appreciate you coming over here and
Sure.
doing this, and I think it's cool that we can share kind of your history, and not just for the business, but I think it'd be nice. It's cool to have it recorded, for posterity. And,
well, that's wise on your part.
And
I wish I could have interviewed my father way back when. I would have had a few more tidbits for today.
Well, I don't know if he would have said anything.
That's probably true.
My grandpa Bob was not a talker, man.
I did actually work with him after hours too. He was given the job of maintaining all the chainsaws, so he would go in afterwards and update the chainsaw. So I learned how to take care of a chainsaw pretty well. But we wouldn't really talk a whole lot in the shop, just kind of filing the chains. But I have some advice on people who want to use a chainsaw, and that is, don't do it. Hire a professional.